Almost 1 in 10 books for children under 5 sold last year was by Julia Donaldson, who's worked with a dozen illustrators. The most recent of her many awards was from the Royal Mail for What the Ladybird Heard, which was illustrated by Lydia Monks. But her name will be forever linked with that of Axel Scheffler, with whom she's written such bestsellers as Zog, Tabby McTat, The Snail and the Whale, Tiddler, and, of course, the Gruffalo, that lovable black-tongued monster who's attained world domination. There's now a whole library of Gruffalo titles and a sequel, Gruffalo's Child. Meanwhile, the Gruffalo and his friends are regulars on stage as Julia and Axel take their monster show on the road. Julia, now you studied French and drama at Bristol, where you busked with the medic who became your husband. Was children's television a goal, or was it just a chance encounter?
It was more a chance encounter, really. I mean, it led to me being commissioned to write songs about all sorts of unlikely subjects, from horrible smells to puppets, you know, all sorts of odd things. But there was one programme that I was asked to write some storytelling songs for, and I came across this. It's a traditional story about an old lady who thinks her house is too small, and I wrote a song telling that story. And then, honestly, it was about at least 12 years later that I got a phone call from a publisher who'd had the BBC tape of that song, and it had kind of stayed in her head, and she was looking around for picture book ideas, and she asked me if she could make a picture book out of the words of that song.
You nearly always write in verse. Does that hold a particular appeal for children? I mean, did it hold a fascination for you as a child?
It did, yes. I've actually, I've got here a book. It's the Book of 1,000 Poems, and I'm really pleased I still got it because it says, Julia Shields with love from Daddy on her 5th birthday. But actually, I don't totally write in verse. I mean, I wouldn't automatically write in verse just for the sake of it. If an idea lends itself to verse, yes, that's probably my forte. Actually, my model really was Michael Flanders and Donald Swan. I used to love them, you know, love their songs, witty.
Right, so that in a way is not so surprising, because you can sort of see how that's...
And they would never, I mean, Michael Flanders would never have a false rhyme or a near rhyme, a half rhyme. Everything was rhymed perfectly and scanned perfectly, and he wouldn't rhyme mine with time. I would never rhyme mine with time, even if kids couldn't care less.
Now, Mr. Gruffalo, who seems to have attained world domination, I'm sure you get tired of talking about the Gruffalo.
I get even tired of talking that I'm saying that I'm tired of talking about the Gruffalo.
Well, I'm sorry about this. But obviously children love him. Where did he come from in your imagination? Did you envisage him?
Actually, the Gruffalo, the story of the Gruffalo is loosely based on an old Oriental folk story, and the version I'd heard was about a little girl who tricks a tiger. And I just couldn't get anything to rhyme with tiger. I couldn't fit the tiger into my rhyme scheme. And so then I thought, if instead of a tiger I just had an imaginary beast, then I could call him whatever I wanted. So I thought of the line, silly old fox, doesn't he know there's no such thing as a... So then he had to be O, you know, he had to be 3 syllables ending in O. I thought he could begin with grr, because that kind of sounded fierce. And then I think Gruffalo just fills itself in, I suppose, because it rhymes with buffalo.
Who suggested Axel as the illustrator? Did you know his work?
No, the first publisher, the publisher that published A Squash and a Squeeze, they came up with 2 different illustrators. First of all, they thought of one, she couldn't do it, then they thought of someone else and she was too busy. It sounds like a fairy story in itself, doesn't it? And then they asked Axel, and so I'm so glad. I tend to be very philosophical now about everything, because I just think if those 2 had said, one of those had said yes, my whole life could have been different. I just think Axel was perfect for that book, and really for all the books he's done.
You grew up in Hamburg, city of Paolozzi and many other great artists. What kind of career did you envision for yourself as a child?
It was clear, sort of from very early on during my studies, that I would do illustration. I was not very good at typography, and I wasn't good at printmaking. And I think I knew quite quickly that drawing children's books would be my field.
Which picture books did you read as a child?
I didn't really have many picture books as a child. My true interest in picture books sort of started when I was a teenager and discovered people like Tommy Ungerer and also sort of grown-up cartoonists like Saul Steinberg and William Steig and Sampé, and that's when my true interest in illustration and sort of humorous illustration began, I think, and Edward Gorey. And
when you were introduced to Julia, what did you think of her? What did she think of you? What did you think of each other?
Can't talk about it. No, I can't. We didn't meet each other before the book was published, so we only met after the book, the first book.
So you just saw the text and she saw your illustrations?
Yes, yes.
So the first drafts of A Squash and a Squeeze, which is the first book, I liked a lot, except that, and Axel will kill me for saying this, I thought that the woman's bosom was much too lovingly shaded, and the other, like I always say, I can tell male illustrators because the bosoms are always very lovingly drawn. But anyway, sorry, Axel.
What happened when she first brought you the rhymes that became the Gruffalo? How long did it take you to kind of, in your mind's eye and then on paper, to come up with the creature we now know and the kind of the characters, his co-stars, as it were?
It didn't take very long. Usually when I read the story, the images are there and I can straight away start sketching. And with the Gruffalo, he was already described in the text. So the orange eyes had to be there, the black tongue. And I did some sketches in my sketchbook, and the original Gruffalos were still looking a bit more wild and frightening than the sort of toned down version that you see in the books. This was my sketchbook at the time, and I started not pencil but like a dip pen, and I do some very quick roughs.
The first sketches did have the animals clothed, and for once I got my way.
So after Julia said she didn't want the mouse to wear clothes, I had to try a slightly more naturalistic mouse.
As you write, I imagine you see the characters in your mind's eye. How long did it take you before you felt with the Gruffalo, and indeed with books in general, the characters sort of measure up?
Well, you see, it's not really up to me what they look like, because, actually, I'll give an example, not from the Gruffalo, from Room and the Broom. The witch in that story, all I say about her is that she has a cat, a very tall hat, and long ginger hair, which she wears in a plait. So she's got to have a pigtail and red hair. But when Axel drew her, she had a huge nose with a wart on it as big as the wart on the Gruffalo's nose. And I have to admit, I was a bit horrified, because I'd imagined her quite young, actually, but very scatty. I'd imagined her very scatty, a bit like I am. And she actually looked very neat. And I did say to my editor, you know, can you ask Axel to sort of redo? And she sort of said, well, I'll see. But I don't think she did, because really I didn't say that the witch didn't have a wart on her nose. So he's entitled to give her a wart. And then very soon, you know, with the Gruffalo or with the witch or almost any of the characters, very soon that's who they are for me.
What do you think is the secret of creating an enduring children's book?
It must be, yeah, well, it's Julia's writing is so brilliant, and there must be some special appeal, and it's a great story, and yeah, it's a little bit scary, and it's funny, and I think it's just a combination that people and children enjoy. We often hear when we do signings that adults enjoy the story as much as children, so that's, I think, a big point if you do a picture book that's really successful, that it has this appeal to everybody in the family.
You know, Axel's quite shy, really, and it took a while to get to know him. But then I think our relationship developed because every time he writes to me, he decorates the envelope very, very wittily. And my postman has a wonderful job, I think, you know, getting all these painted envelopes and trying to decipher where my name and address actually are. And yeah, that wit there came across, you know, even more than in the books. And now we've toured, we've done German tours together. We're acting out the stories in German, and obviously we got to know each other well when we were on the road together.
It's really a stage show, and I'm not really an actor, but I get little parts to play, and I'm quite happy that I don't have to do it every day. But I would be the owl and the Gruffalo. I never get the major parts. That's Julia's husband.
You've never got into that Gruffalo costume?
No.
And when you approached to re-illustrate Old Possum's book of Practical Cats, what were the particular challenges of something that's such a celebrated title in the children's canon?
I didn't really know it that well, because in Germany, obviously, it's not... And I knew some of the poems, but I never read all of them, and I'd never been to Cats, to the musical. And I tried not to... I mean, I mentioned Edward Gorey before, and he's one of my sort of favorite illustrators, so I try not to look at his wonderful illustrations.
We're on the cusp of great change, of course, in the publishing industry, and children are always eager early adopters of technology. What difference do you think iPads and so on might make to you as an illustrator, and indeed to the direction in which children's books might go?
I have no idea. Like, everybody seems to be completely in the dark. What's going to happen and what the changes will be. I sort of see that it's unavoidable that there will be some form of digital reading and digital way of looking at books, and I've been very old-fashioned and skeptical, like I think most of my colleagues. But I think it's going to happen anyway, and I think it's really important that there will be quality products there for children, and it can still be about reading, and it can still be about sharing with your parents.
I mean, I was shown a digital book, an e-book of Alice in Wonderland, with a button you could press to make Alice's neck go up and down. It had the full text, you know. But I thought, well, any child looking at that page, they're not going to really be listening or reading the text about, I wish my cat Dinah was here, or whatever it says. They're just going to be pressing this wretched button and making her neck go up and down. You know, as a writer who I do choose my words very carefully, and I really want the attention to be on my words and on Axel's pictures, not on all sorts of buttons that people are going to press.